Welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the Forgot to Save podcast, a twice-monthly gaming podcast where we go back and play the games that we always meant to but never got around to doing so with you, the listeners.
And I'm Stone, and if you're not already listening on YouTube, SoundCloud, Google Play, iTunes, or Stitcher, you can find us on any of those platforms. Now, again, we are having an episode where it is just me, but I thought just me isn't enough this time. I am joined today by who I would like to call Robot Mike. I am here with the disembodied voice of Mike, who will not be able to share any unique opinions, but we'll see how far science and technology has come that we can have a robot replica of my co-host today.
Really? Okay, I'm intrigued now.
All right, but Robo Mike, you don't have to pretend to be interested. In fact, you don't really have any real emotions.
Absolutely.
Which is really so conflicting because this month we are playing Life is Strange, which is kind of a very emotional game.
Yes.
And but before that, we play, as always, our free game of the month. Now, Mike and I, the real Mike, had originally decided to play a game, which we're actually going to save for next month now because he's unavailable to join us for this episode. So we kind of went to a backup, and that is Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. Now, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes is a free mobile game, and in my opinion, I honestly think it is one of the most balanced mobile games. Now, when you are playing a game that has Star Wars in the title, it's very hard to be unbiased because Star Wars is a franchise that everyone is already so familiar with. You kind of have this bias that the game is going to be enjoyable because of the theme that it takes place in.
Right.
Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes is an RPG, turn-based, more or less, style game where you can collect various heroes spanning out throughout the entire Star Wars expanded universe canon and collect and pit them against each other in different mission-based game modes. But they also have some PvP arenas that aren't necessarily live. You don't play a player's live team, but you do play, their matchup for the team controlled by an AI. It has a lot of really cool guild raid functions, and it's very much in the Star Wars atmosphere. I find myself really, really, really excited to play as Star Wars characters and collect more of them, even characters I wasn't terribly fond of. But they have characters throughout all of the movies, as well as a lot of the books, the Clone Wars and Rebels TV shows. It is really a blast, and I think it is phenomenally well balanced. I never at any point during the game felt the need to buy any of the currency. There are multiple currencies depending on what you like to do, like the arenas, for example, or there's kind of an endless mode where your health continues throughout the next battle called Galactic Warfare. They have their own unique currency if you like to play that mode, the standard story mode, quote-unquote, and it all helps balance out your characters enough that you can play the game once a day and not feel like you're behind the curve in any way. You're getting a lot of really meaningful play out of it. Alongside that, you also have a lot of daily missions to do. If I sit down and do the daily missions, I have about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours if I really stretch it out, worth of playtime where I feel like I'm achieving something. But also, if I miss a day, I don't really feel like, I'm not going to get the character I want, or I'm not going to achieve the goal I want to, because it is so well balanced. It's really fantastic. They use the original music from the Star Wars movies and shows, really composed by John Williams, and it adds to the atmosphere. It's really phenomenal. It's a Star Wars experience through and through. And honestly, even if this didn't have a Star Wars coat of paint on it, I would still really appreciate this game because it is phenomenally well balanced for a Star Wars mobile game. It is the best mobile game I think that I've ever played, legitimately. But the reason that this can be so dangerous is because I have terrible opinions. So my opinions, completely unchallenged by anyone, can be very dangerous. I'm happy to share my opinion for a free mobile game. I really suggest checking it out. If you are a Star Wars fan, it's that extra coat of paint on it that's going to look real nice. You will definitely love this game. I super suggest Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, and I could really talk in depth to it, but I'm not going to talk your ear off because even though I am solo in this episode today, I still have two very awesome people who have shared their commentary with us on this game of the month, Life is Strange.
I only personally killed one. Yep.
Excuse me, what? What is that? What is that even? You can't just... you can... I have my doubts about you. I don't know if this is... I don't think we're ready for robots, especially on something as small scale as this podcast.
So you had asked me to talk about execution.
Oh my gosh, no, absolutely not. Nope. We're moving on. Stop.
That was disappointing. Highly.
So, without further ado, let's talk about the main game, because that is where all the meat is at, and there's a lot of discussion to go around with it. Now, Robot Mike, have you ever played Life is Strange?
Yeah.
Now, Robot Mike, I'll ask you first. How much time have you put into Life of Strange? And tell me just generally what you thought about it.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the Forgot to Save podcast.
Okay, no.
Twice-monthly...
What you did there was you repeated the intro. What I wanted you to do was tell me how much time you've played Life is Strange and what you thought about it.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the Forgot to Save podcast.
That's the intro again. Just, okay, easier. Do you like the game Life is Strange?
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning in.
All right, this isn't working. I tried. I'm sorry. We are shutting you off here. Here we go. Okay. Now, let's get on to actual opinions on the game. Okay, now, for those of you that don't know, Life is Strange is a very story-driven game. It is very much like a drama, but with a lot of sci-fi elements infused. You play as Max, who is a high schooler in this kind of private art high school. She is taking photography classes because she wants to be a photographer under a former famous photographer whose popularity was in the 90s and now goes on to teach. So it's a really important program, and photography is pretty central to her life and who her character is. But she finds out that she has some kind of powers. She is the ability to rewind time. So originally we are introduced to this concept when she experiences a traumatic event, and I won't spoil it for those of you that want to play it, but I would really encourage you to go check it out because it is a 5-episode game. They're played in episodes, and episode 1 is free. If you get it on Steam, if you get it on PS4, if you get it on Xbox One, episode 1 is completely free. So you get to try and then decide if you want to continue playing the game from there. And I asked 2 people to play episode 1 for free without investing any other money into it, and then submit to me what they thought their opinion was. So I really want to share the first one with you because I feel like our first submission here does a really good job of recapping without spoilers the game and the characters for you. So this is an awesome listener of ours, Captain Ozannus. He is a non-native English speaker, and he tried very, very hard to make everything very clear and concise, and I think he does an amazing job. So everyone, a little golf clap for Captain there. He speaks English better than I do, but he is going to give you his summary, and then we'll talk about it in a moment here. So here we go. Without further ado, Captain's opinion.
Hey everyone, it's Captain Ozannus here. I was invited by Stone to tell my thoughts about Life is Strange, and I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, Stone, for inviting me. Okay, let's begin. So, Life is Strange is one of those choice-based games. You know what I'm talking about, they've been really popular lately. The story shapes and moves around the choices you make in-game. That way you get different scenarios. And this normally causes the player to play the game again and again to see all the choices, but Life is Strange is a mechanic that is rewinding time travel, so to speak. So that way you can always choose an option, see the result, then come back and choose the other option and decide which one you are going to select. And that is very original and a very welcome mechanic in my opinion. And that is what makes Life is Strange special. Instead of choosing one option, then opening out a YouTube video to see the other option's results, you can just see both of the results, then choose accordingly, which is amazing. So the main character is Max. She also has a best friend named Chloe, and they both live in Arcadia Bay. At the beginning of the game, we learn that Max actually leaves Arcadia Bay for 5 years and lives in Seattle. Then she gets accepted by the Blackwell Academy, which is a great photography class, and she wants to become a photographer, so she comes back to the Arcadia Bay. But in those 5 years, Chloe and her doesn't really talk much, so she doesn't want to call Chloe when she comes back. After a month or so from her arrival, she discovers her powers and meets up with Chloe again. So that's the main story of episode 1. So Max is an insecure and shy girl. She doesn't really talk much in school. She doesn't have a lot of friends, and she doesn't like to show her work to her photography teacher. So Max's best friend Chloe, the second main character, is just a typical teenager. She does all the cool things, like underage drinking, smoking, doing drugs, failing school. You know, she's really a really cool girl. We learn that Chloe didn't used to be like this. Before Max leaves, her father dies. Chloe's father dies. So she loses her father, then her best friend, so she just becomes a punk. She changes a lot. Which makes me feel sorry for Chloe actually. I can't relate with that character, I just feel sorry for her. Other than those two, we have a ton of side characters. We have Victoria, who is the rich and beautiful, evil girl of the school. Like, she's kind of like a villain. Then we have Nathan Prescott, and he is even more rich than Victoria because his parents actually donated a lot to the Blackwell Academy, and they have their own dormitory named after them, the Prescott Dormitory, the place where Max stays. He is kind of like the male clone version of Victoria, another villain. Then there is a teacher, Mr. Jefferson. Max has a crush on Mr. Jefferson, and he and his work is the reason she applied to Blackwell Academy in the first place. Then we have Kate, who is even more shy than Max, and she always gets bullied in school, and she's always sad and she always cries. Then the last important character is Chloe's stepdad. He's an ex-soldier and he still acts like he's in the army. He calls Chloe soldier, and he says some stuff like, "That is an order," you know. He's actually a security guard in Blackwell, and he wants to place cameras all around Blackwell. He even has some secret cameras inside Chloe's home, and he spies on other people. He secretly takes pictures of Kate. So yeah, that's all the characters in the first episode. I almost completely forgot about this guy, Warren. Warren is that science geek guy who tries to be a gentleman around ladies, and he has a crush on Max, and it's so obvious. Probably Max knows about it, but she doesn't seem to care that much. she just sees him as a friend, and you can tell by the way she ignores his messages that he sends on her phone. But Warren is actually brave. He did take a few punches from Nathan in the middle of the episode 1, so respect for that guy. You're a good guy, Warren. A good guy. Some of these characters are really interesting in my opinion, but I don't really find Max and Chloe, the main two of the game, that much interesting. They're a bit cliche because one is a shy kid and the other is a rebel teenager. But their interaction with each other is really fun to watch because they grew up together, but they change a lot in those 5 years. So you see them trying to get that old friendship back. I actually like the story of this game because it feels like a teenage story, a teenage movie infused with sci-fi action, sci-fi fantasy action. Because you got some normal stuff like going to the dormitory and seeing teenage drama, and you still have the time rewinding powers, so you use them to fix it, which is very realistic because if any of us got a power like that to rewind time, we wouldn't be a superhero, we would just use it in our own advantage, right? What I would recommend while playing this game is taking your time. When I first watched this game on YouTube, a lot of the YouTubers, they just ran past some stuff. And that's the logical way to record that game because you can't just stop in the middle of the gameplay and read the journal Max just wrote. No, some people will get bored of that. So instead you just skip some dialogue and go straight to the objective. When you're playing the game yourself, you have the power to do whatever you want. So you can stop and read the journal. You can click on everything and hear what Mike is going to comment about them. It's really relaxing because you also have some amazing music in the background. You feel sucked into that world, which is really fun. I also want to talk briefly about the music for a second because the music is amazing. When I first played the game, I didn't actually realize the music. I didn't actually care for the music, but when I played it again for the second time to record my voice for this podcast, I absolutely loved it. It's perfect for the environment around you, and it's so relaxing. It's just great. Speaking of environment, the school is very well done. It feels kinda alive, not much because there are not many people around. We later learned that this school was made for senior year 12th grade high schoolers, so that's why it's not that big and that's why there's not many people around. But it still feels, like I said, alive when you see those teenagers walking in the corridors and speaking with each other and doing what teenagers do. I don't know what teenagers do, don't ask me, how would I know? But yeah, the school actually feels like it's a real school filled with real people, which is great for a game like this, a story-based game like this. The game is not that difficult, and you don't have many difficulty factors either, you just have puzzles. So, and you can easily solve the puzzles the game throws at you. You just have to do something, rewind time, and do another thing. That's basically all the puzzles in this game. So overall, I don't actually like the main two characters, but I love their interactions with each other. I love the way story is going. I like the gameplay, but it could be some more stuff to do other than solve puzzles and click around. I know they could have found something with time travel. That's a big concept, you know. I like the music. I really like the music, and I like the environment this game gives us. So it's perfect if you're looking for a story and choice-based game. I would really recommend you play it and give it a try. Yeah, that's all I have to say. See ya.
All right, that was Captain Ozannus, and he gave a lot of really seriously fantastic insight in this. I love that when you listen to Captain's voice clip there, it kind of sounds like, you're just kind of chatting with a friend. He's a little gabby. It's funny that he's like, we're talking about a game about these teenagers in high school, and he's kind of like gabbing like a teenager, so it's funny. He had a lot of really great insights into all the characters, and I'll touch on them later, but just really the broader scope of what he said. I think it's important. The story, I think he nailed it. It is a teen movie kind of infused with sci-fi. When I was playing this, I immediately thought, this is like Donnie Darko, the game. It's really fantastically melded, that it doesn't feel too heavy in one spectrum or the other. It strikes a really good balance. He did say he wished the gameplay was a little bit more exciting. It is just puzzle solving, but that's really just because this is a narrative game. I think it has a little bit more depth than some of the other narrative games we're seeing now, where it's like just walk around and experience things, and the flashback gives it that extra, but he made a really good point. I mean, the fact that you can control time and rewind lets you choose an option, rewind, experience the next option, rewind, and choose whatever option you want from the two of those then. He had said that originally when he experienced the game, it was because he watched it on YouTube, and when you are recording something on YouTube, like he said, they kind of rush through it because it's boring to sit there and watch someone else read this extra lore and do all this. You really just want to see the story that way. He said that he got a lot more out of it from actually playing it, so I'm really happy that he took something away. I do really think this is a game that needs to be experienced. It's a hard one to watch. Another great point I think Captain made was that it's realistic that these powers go to a teenage girl in high school, and she uses them to resolve drama. He said, like, when they were in the dorms, there was a bunch of drama going on, and she would rewind time in order to fix these issues. And he said something great. It's if we had that power, we would just use it in our own lives. We wouldn't really be out being superheroes. And I think that was great perspective, and it really kind of makes you appreciate the fact that Max is given these powers, and you discover them immediately in the game, and then she uses them kind of for the benefit of those around her. Now, there are some choices that let them use them to Max's benefit, but it's cool you have the option of kind of shaping Max as a character as much as she is predefined as kind of like an introvert, and she's just interested in photography and doesn't really have a lot of friends and doesn't, spread her roots out. Taking your time is important to this game. Absolutely. Going through and experiencing everything you can is how you're going to get the most of this, like we do with almost all the games we've played previously. But I think it's emphasized the most in this because seeing different posters on the wall, searching through different cabinets, looking through bags, getting getting Max's thoughts on people is really important to shape the entirety of your conversations with people and what choices you can make and what choices are unlocked, because some of them aren't available until you learn certain information. It's all really important to take your time. And that kind of leads me into the fact that the narrator for this entire game is Max, but it's Max's thoughts. So as much as it does kind of feel like an omnipotent narrator, you also are confined just within Max's beliefs. So you are like unraveling what happened to this missing girl Rachel throughout the game, and you only know what Max knows, but you don't ever feel like you are excluded from any information. Because you were listening to Max's thoughts, it's kind of, it's really well done where you're not out of the loop. You know, she is a narrator, but she's also making sure that everything you want to know is completely encompassed, that is within her power to give you. I really liked that. I thought that was not necessarily unique, but super, super well fitted to this particular game. We will explore a little bit more what Captain says about the characters after we hear from our next submission here. Now, I have not listened to this yet, but I know that this is from my girlfriend Shelby, and she is super stuffed up right now. Her allergies are super bad, so I know that she's going to sound super nasally, and she would probably like to apologize for that beforehand. She has only played through episode 1, and when I was coming up to record this, I saw that she had logged on to continue playing. So I think it's safe to assume that she likes this game, but let's take a moment to hear for sure what she thought of it. So here we go. Let's listen to Shelby's voice clip.
Hi guys, this is Shelby. I'm the girl that Stone pays to be his girlfriend. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the game Life is Weird. I only got through chapter 1 so far, but it already has a very Donnie Darko kind of feel to it with a true crime twist. So all of the characters so far are teenager, that young adult range, but they're dealing with this unsolved crime, and your job as the player is to look for clues and hopefully try and solve it then. So part of playing the game involves making all of these choices, which I really enjoyed. It reminded me a lot of Up Until Dawn, which is a game I liked. I don't play a lot of very difficult games, but I do like these choice-based games. So it did remind me a lot of that. And it also is something I'm much more likely to play and finish playing because it wasn't super challenging. So part of the game, which I think is kind of different from other choice-based games, is that you're actually able to rewind time and change some of your choices and the consequences of those choices. I really like that. It has a very choose-your-own-adventure book kind of feel to it. When I was a kid, I really liked reading those murder mystery choose-your-own-adventure books, and if I didn't really like the result of the choice I made, I would just, go back and pretend like it never happened. That's something that I did a lot while playing this game. You can play out a consequence, see what happens, rewind, try the other one, and then just go with whichever one you like best, which is a lot of fun and kind of adds some deeper meaning to the story that I don't think you would get otherwise. Another part of this game, which is something I actually don't think I did very well in, was looking for clues and snooping. I am always doing that in my real life, so I really thought I would be better at it in this book, and I just wasn't. I kept being afraid to snoop and causing these consequences, sort of forgetting that I can rewind time and undo whatever I was doing. So when I do go back and play it on the PC and kind of move forward to the further chapters, I'm definitely going to be looking around more and snooping more. And when you find things, it also unlocks other possibilities for your future choices and things like that. So it does have a big impact on the game. The game also deals with some pretty heavy themes. There's some sexuality, there's some drug use, there's a lot of violence, things like that the characters are dealing with, which adds this kind of deeper meaning and, this kind of a more intense feeling from the game that I don't think you get everywhere. And something that I really appreciated about the game was before the opening credits even came, there was this kind of a hint of an LGBTQ relationship. It wasn't addressed again. It wasn't really followed up. I think that possibility is still there, but it wasn't a plot point. I always appreciate when there is this LGBT visibility in any kind of media, so I really liked that. And I do think that not making it a plot point kind of adds more validity to the relationship that may or may not have existed. So I really did appreciate that in the game. The first chapter is a lot of meeting people. There's a whole part you just walk through the hall and you can, see everybody. You can gather clues that way. You're forming these relationships. a lot of these characters seem to be very stereotypical. There was, a character where her biggest defining characteristic was that she was a cheerleader. The same goes for a boy who was a football player. There was, the skateboard kids, the artsy kids. They all kind of seem to fit into this very stereotypical mold. But I do think that it's something that might be further developed as the plot develops. I think there's a lot of potential for a lot of the characters. I just haven't really seen any of that unfold yet. But I could see that being more interesting down the line as the chapters unfold. And I also think a lot of their development is based on the choices that you make in developing your relationship with them, which is pretty cool too. So you play as Max, and she's a teenage girl. I usually do really like a female lead. I just wouldn't say that Max is a very strong female lead. And that might say more about me than it does about Max, because I am playing her. I just thought that some of her dialogue was really silly. I didn't always like all of the choices that you had with her. I think she was still pretty stereotypical, but again, this is the beginning and a lot's being developed, so this could change down the road. She has a lot of possibility there. So again, I don't really play a lot of games, especially difficult games. I actually had a hard time walking and using the camera at the same time with this game, but I would say that it is an easier game, but I don't think that takes away from it at all, because again, it's such a story-based game. And because I don't play a lot of games, I don't really know a lot about graphics and things like that, but I will say that you can definitely tell with this game that it's a little dated with the graphics, like no one's hair ever moves, things like that. There's a scene where someone's wearing earrings and they're, moving their head, shaking it around, and their earrings are just staying still. So some of that stuff is pointed out, but I don't think it takes away from the story at all. I just think it might date it a little bit. But overall, I am really excited to keep playing the game. I'm excited to see how the choices I'm making are going to affect chapters further down the line. I also think it's really cool at the end of each chapter, it tells you how your choices were in percentage to everyone else who's played the game. So you can kind of see where you kind of stack up against everyone else. And when I finished, I was asking Stone the choices he made, and we could see kind of how different our stories were so far just through that. Again, I will probably be snooping and looking for clues a little more the second time I play it, but overall it's a really fun game, and I am kind of excited to see where it leads.
Okay, so that was my best impression of a girl. Did that sound like a girl to you? No, there was a lot of insightful comments, especially because that was the only commentary we have from a former teenage girl, so that is helpful for identifying with Max. But also that is from a very casual player. She said she doesn't really play a lot of games, and if she does, they're not terribly difficult. So it's cool that we have the same level of enjoyment as Captain did from someone who is a lot more casual. She did not necessarily talk a lot about the characters in depth. Her commentary was a lot more toward the overall scope of the game. But something she did mention is that a lot of the characters do fall into archetypes. And we'll talk about that a little bit more specifically. But the kind of optimistic outlook is one I also align with, where she says the characters are kind of in archetypes now, but they might expand more as the story goes on. And I believe that will probably be the case. These characters can kind of mold based on your choices. So if they're stale or stagnant, that might be on you as the player. Exploring these characters and who they are could expand a little bit more later in the story, and I'm hoping that is something we can talk about later when we have the finale for this game, because I'm really hoping that is an area that's expanded on. Another thing she had mentioned is the graphics being a little bit outdated, which I would agree with. I was playing this game, I don't know if you guys know this, I tend to play games in 4K. It's like this really cool resolution. It's above 1080p. It's like pretty small scale. But it didn't really look spectacular in there either. In fact, I would say maybe stretched it out and made it look a little worse. I don't know. The graphics when you are at the 4K resolution, become a little bit more cartoony. The environment is a little bit more painted, whereas the characters are trying to look a little more serious. So it can be jarring, but I wouldn't say that it took away from the game at all for me. It had such a strong appeal to find out more about the relationships between your characters and the story that I didn't find myself dwelling on the fact that it didn't look, as best as it could. The thing I had noticed is what she pointed out when you meet the character Dana. She is wearing earrings that hang off of her ears a considerable distance, and she's like looking down, reading a magazine or something in her lap at one point, and they are just normally seated, directly parallel with her ears, and it doesn't, they haven't moved at all. So that's the only thing that really threw me off graphic wise. And she didn't say this in her recap, but she did say when she was playing it, and Captain had said this as well, but the music is really phenomenal. It fits the atmosphere pretty well. It is something a teenager or teenagers would be listening to that isn't like, ugh, this is like boring, pandering teenage rock. It's nice, rhythmic, acoustic music. It adds to the theme of the game as well as something realistic the characters will be listening to. So they did a phenomenal job with the music. And one time I feel like it's implemented pretty well, and this is another thing I got a Donnie Darko vibe off of, is that once you kind of open up the game and you're walking down the hallway that Shelby had mentioned that explores all the characters, you kind of have your headphones in and you're listening to this music, and it's kind of the start of every coming-of-age movie where you have the pan down the hallway and you see, here's the first look at this character, and, he's a football player and he's flirting with this girl, and then we have this nerd and he's being like, his head's being shoved into a toilet or he's being put against a locker or something. So those archetypes are there, but it's a cool, teen movie kind of thing. It's really fun. This game has phenomenal atmosphere. They use it to their best ability, and it shows. I think they really did it well. So let's talk a little bit more specifics on the characters, because I feel like Captain had a lot to say about that. And the first person he mentioned was Chloe, and I think she's one of the more important characters because I would consider her the other main character. You have Max, and I feel like there's not really a lot to say with her because it's molded by every player in particular. Chloe is her best friend that she reconnects with after 5 years. Max had moved to Seattle and then comes back when she gets accepted to this new school, and she reconnects with her friend Chloe. Now, since you'd left Chloe, she had to deal with the death of her father, and then her best friend Max moving away and no longer contacting her. Max, for whatever reason, had not kept in contact with Chloe. So she fell in with a bad crowd. She started doing drugs. She started drinking at a young age. She was kicked out of school for getting bad grades. As Captain said, all the stereotypical cool things, and I would like to amend that maybe getting kicked out of school isn't a cool thing to do. But Chloe is really outgoing. She dyes her hair blue. She starts dressing differently. She's like the punk rock aesthetic. And Max is kind of envious of Chloe in that regard, but she sees that Chloe's like looking for that person to hang on to. Her mom has since married someone else. She has this stepdad who turns out to be the security guard at the school living with her, and he treats her like a soldier, like Captain said. He's very militant, and he's kind of past his prime, but still holding on to the glory days of being in the military. You find out that he's putting cameras all around the house, and he's tracking people, and he is kind of stalking, more or less, Kate, one of your classmates at school. He's taking pictures of her, and he's openly confronting her and harassing her verbally, and it's really powerful. But you can't help but transfer how you see him act with Kate on campus to how he may be treating Chloe in the home. So it's kind of crazy to see everything compounded on Chloe, and you really start to sympathize with her, and you as a player kind of want to reach out your hand to her, not just because that's what Max wants to do, but because, you legitimately want to help a person you perceive as being in trouble. So I think that connection with Chloe is instilled in you very quickly, and it's something really meaningful. So I really appreciate the relationship between them, and I know that Captain had said he's not the biggest fan of Max and Chloe as characters, but he really liked the relationship, and I would absolutely agree with that. I think that's a phenomenal relationship, and I look forward to exploring that more, but I could definitely see how Max's faith in this relationship with Chloe could go awry, because as soon as you are in trouble at one point, she kind of throws you under the bus pretty immediately. But another thing with Max is that she is introduced as insecure and introvert. She doesn't want to turn in these photos she's taking, even though she's confident in her ability to take photos to an extent, and she's getting positive reinforcement from her teacher. But every time you get to go back in time, you kind of have this moment as Max where you reach out to these other people. So as introverted as you are, she seems, based on your choices, pretty eager to help. So she can kind of break out of her shell, or at least you feel the potential for her to break out of her shell, which is something I'm really looking forward to exploring as we continue to play these next chapters, because I absolutely plan on finishing this game. I'm already kind of hooked, and I can definitely say that Shelby is into it because she's still playing it. So I don't know. I'm really excited to see Max come about. She's not my favorite main character, and like Shelby said, she's not like a super strong female lead, but she can get there, and I feel like she really has the potential to do it. So I'm really excited for her to, kind of break out of her comfort zone. I don't know. I think there's a lot of characters here that you could say have obvious glaring problems. And I think what's cool about the writing in this is that they present everyone's flaws pretty immediately, and you start to remember those flaws. Shelby had said this is a lot like a choose your own adventure and like a true crime book. And I think that is true. You're kind of logging these people's flaws as evidence of something that could happen later. You're constantly aware of these people's personalities, their strengths and weaknesses, so that you'll know how what you've done in the past will affect them in the future. And logging all this knowledge, I think, is also kind of what's exciting to me, because I'm looking forward to not only breaking Max out of her shell, but learning about all these characters. I want to know their backstories. I want to know what they become, because these are all kids with potential in high school that want to be something bigger. But then there's also people with glaring problems. Like I said, with David, who's the security guard, he is trying to relive those glory days in the military. You have Kate, who's clearly dealing with some shades of depression, and she's going through bullying. We have Logan, who is a football player, but he's also very much a bully to people. I don't know. But you also see he leaves a note for another character, Dana, in her dorm, where he just starts to show a sensitive side. There are a lot of really cool tidbits you can dive into if you really take the time to look for them. And I'm really, I don't know if I'm praising the writing as much as it should be praised, because it is seriously phenomenal, and I really hope that keeps up for the next 4 episodes. Now, Captain had also mentioned Victoria, who we see pretty early on is, like almost all the characters, a stereotype. She is the rich girl bully who wants to put everyone down at every moment. And we do get to see some vulnerability with her. I'll let you explore it on your own if you decide to play episode 1, and I would really, really encourage you to. But you get a moment kind of alone with her, and you just reach out your hand and start to have a real conversation with her, and then you guys can explore, and then you can choose, do you want to take the high road and be nice, or do you want to take the low road and be a jerk because she's a jerk? And I was really happy to see, like Shelby had mentioned in her little excerpt there, you get kind of stacked up against the global ratings at the end. You get to see how many people, percentage-wise, in the world made the choices that you made. And when I had played and got to the end of episode 1, it was nice to see that the majority of people, by a vast majority, at least a 60% difference between them, had chosen to extend the olive branch and be nice, but not just with Victoria. In other instances where you have the option to kind of be a jerk or stand on the sidelines and let something bad happen to someone, most people stepped up or became, the peace offering. It's really refreshing to see that that's the way most people want to play the game, but it's also cool to see if you want to kind of make this game a joke and just have a good time being a jerk, that option's always there, and you can experience that as much as you want to. It is really cool that it gives you a little bit of faith that the majority of people wanted to do the right thing. But moving on from Victoria, we do also see the opposite side of the spectrum. There's a person that is mean, and then they're just meaner, and then perceived ultimately as like completely evil, and that's Nathan. And I think Captain described him in summation as like richer and eviler than Victoria, and I think that's very much the case. But I think Nathan also has some legitimate mental issues that he would definitely need to work through, but I'll leave that to you guys to explore on your own. But it's cool that we are seeing these different shades of people that you have to interact with. I mean, I can't say it enough. These relationships are really fun to explore, and I look forward to delving into them a little bit more deeply. But lastly, I think the last really main character, there's a bunch more characters that you can meet on campus here, but is Warren. Warren does obviously have a crush on Max, and it's really cool to see him kind of trying to get her attention when clearly she's so distracted by something else. You feel a little bad for him, but I don't know, Warren does prove to be a really good guy, and obviously Captain is a fan of him. he wants the best for him, so I don't know, I think if Captain kept playing, he would really be trying to get Warren to ultimately be with Max. But we'll see if that's the case, if that's all on the surface or there's something deeper to explore, because I don't know, it's safe to say that I have my doubts about people now. I think the people that are portrayed as really good or nice people, we might see a 180 depending on what choices you have later in the game. I'm just really excited, because even though these characters are very much archetypes now, there is a certain level of complexity to them that I'm just super, super stoked to explore in more depth. I also want to point out one more thing. I watched Shelby playing through this, and she was trying to take as many pictures as possible. You have certain options to take pictures. It's not like you can't press a button and pull up your camera. She was taking a lot of pictures of people in pain, for lack of a better term. There were people in physical pain, and then there were also people like being yelled at or something, and she would stand on the sideline to take pictures of them. So I have a real true fear that she might be a little crazy. So I'm a little scared to hear the rest of her playthrough, but hopefully we'll follow up with her and hear what she has to say toward the game's end. And I think it might be a little bit different than what I did, but I don't know. I'm really looking forward to exploring this a lot more in depth. It's fun to go in and see every nook and cranny and hear not only, what you go through in the dialogue with these characters, but you can also hear Max's opinion on them before you even talk to them. And even if it's somebody you've seen before, you don't think like, oh, hey, this is Warren. He gave me this flash drive to watch these movies, and he's a really cool guy. You say, oh, like Warren looks like this today, or it's possible that, he remembered this from what I said last time. So you are constantly getting Max's thoughts if you want them. And I think it really adds a lot to the game. It doesn't necessarily tell you how to feel either. It's kind of unbiased, which is weird because we're seeing this from one character's perspective, and they still manage to keep you kind of pulled away so that you're not influenced to make one decision or another. I have insane praise for Life is Strange so far, and I'm really, 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 really hoping that doesn't change. I want to keep this up. I would love to keep experiencing this game, and I am insanely happy that we're deciding to play it for this month, and I cannot wait to hear what Mike has to say about it. But I've ranted enough, and we all know that my cynical opinions can be so dangerous when unchecked. So I would love, love, love to hear your opinions. Facebook.com/forgot to save, or our Discord linked in the description of wherever you are watching or listening to this, because it's on YouTube and it's on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, or Stitcher. And I absolutely want to hear your opinions and look forward to discussing this next time. I don't want to talk your ear off and talk in circles, so I'm going to be calling this one. I am not bringing back Robot Mike to do this outro. He was insane, okay? I don't think I can take that. I don't think our reputation is worth tarnishing by this robot. It's insane. But anyway, thank you all so much for listening. This has been the Forgot to Save podcast. I have been Stone, and I would love to hear from you guys on our Facebook and Discord, and look forward to talking about the season and the Life is Strange finale on October the 15th. I will see you then. Thank you guys so much. Have a good one.